Besides, this isn't gonna last very long because it's really hot.
We have a mayor's award of excellence, I believe.
I forgot my scissor saver bag to get my Viagra hat.
You need to put it on.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're getting off to a little bit of a delayed start, so we're going to get this meeting started now. I'd like to welcome you to the Lincoln City Council meeting of December 12th, 2016. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silent meditation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin today with a special presentation of the mayor. Welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Members of the council, as you're aware, this is the Mayor's Award of Excellence for October. It is being presented to Mr. Kerry Steele here, who is Public Safety Dispatch Supervisor for the Communications Unit of the Police Department. Communications Coordinator Julie Ryder-Dove nominated Steele in the category of productivity for his work to improve the existing cardiac arrest protocol. Steele attended a resuscitation academy in Seattle, kept his nose to the grindstone out there, and returned with several ideas for ways that the 911 Center could improve survival rates for patients with sudden cardiac arrest. One of those ideas was the creation of a modified ECHO response. The ECHO designation is given to those cases with the highest priority. Julie said Steele was instrumental in creating a process to modify the protocol for these cases to allow a more immediate dispatch of EMS personnel and provision of CPR instructions. Julie wrote, since adoption of the ECHO response protocol on June 1st of this year, the 911 call center processing times for these types of calls has decreased approximately 30 seconds, which can be critical for these types of incidents. So it's my pleasure today to present Kerry Steele with the Mayor's Award of Excellence for October. Please join me in congratulating Kerry for the hard work and commitment to the city of Lincoln. Thank you. I think Police Chief Lannister wanted to say a few words.
Thanks, Mayor. Very congratulations. Thank you. I think it's so important in an example like this that Julie Ryder shared that Kerry not only went out to a training, but he took it all in, and then he brought back changes that could obviously improve some processes here in Lincoln. And we're very appreciative of that and his communication skills with his team that are represented well today. And thanks a lot, Kerry. Great job.
Thank you.
Kerry, perhaps you'd like to say a few words or introduce your family, maybe.
Well, yeah. My wife Laura in the back, and my mom, Catherine Sinks, and my team here. We got Leslie, Brent, Sharon, Kelly, and Julie Ryder. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Come on back and we'll take some pictures. Thank you.
Thank you.
While people are exiting the chambers, I'll just make you all aware that in accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted in the back of the chamber. And the order of the business of our City Council meeting is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on our agenda under public hearing, and anyone who wishes to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk has called that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those who are opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether or not speaking in favor of or in opposition to the item. Testimony will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker, and as a reminder, a timer will sound when there is only 1 minute left. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and those items listed under third reading. On the second and last Mondays of the month immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date nor planned for a future agenda. Our schedule for open mic night is a little different this month because of the holidays. Agendas are available outside the entrance to chambers or online, and parking passes are available should anyone wish to use one to get out of the parking garage to the north of the city-county building. Will Teresa please call the first item of business?
Yes. Those giving testimony, we do request you to please clearly state your name and address and to sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium. First item is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 9.
Would anyone like to speak on these items 1 through 9? Looks like our city attorney would.
Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney. You will notice that item number 2, which is a contract with Arrigo Software Technologies, there's a request to place that on pending. We had some adjustments we had to make to the contract. Those are now done, and the contract has been signed, but it was not in your packets. So I would request a motion to put this on pending for December 19th, and we'll get it in your packet for this next week.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Are we voting on that now then, or?
You certainly could vote on it.
Okay,
Just put it on pending for next week.
okay.
So really just delay action. Okay, delay action for 1 week.
Okay, Teresa, please call the roll on the motion to delay action on item number 2 to December 19th.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird? Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
We'll go back to any public comment on the other remaining items on our consent agenda, 1 and 3 through 9.
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs of Lincoln Government. I would like to have you remove the amount to Friendship Home of $10,000 because they are already included in the 2017-28 mayor's budget. I see no reason why they need to have an additional $10,000. If you find that they do, then you can justify that. But the way it stands, Watchdogs does not think this is an equitable way to handle the taxpayers' money.
Ms. Kinsey, are you speaking to item 1 then, the Human Services Keno appropriations? Is that the item?
Yes.
Okay. And I think we might want to have that grant clarified by Sarah Hoyle, our Human Services Director. I think may in fact just be the same item that's in our budget. Can you want to make sure? And then you will absolutely have a continued period to talk.
Okay. Good afternoon, Sarah Hoyle, Director of Lincoln Lancaster Human Services. The amount for $10,000 for Friendship Home that is being discussed here is for 2 specific things. It's for interpretation for our clients who don't speak English as their primary language, and then it is also to help clients when the shelter is full to stay in a hotel for safety reasons if the perpetrator of the domestic act is putting the victim in harm's way, where we think that safety is paramount in that situation. So I'm not sure what is in the mayor's budget for Friendship Home, but I can tell you specifically these 2 items are what we're addressing.
Okay, I apologize. I was under the interpretation that this is in fact just a reflection of what we passed in the budget, that these are the identical grants, but if you can't clarify that, I'm not sure where we get the clarification.
This is for Keno, which was on the agenda. I think you had referenced that you saw this in the mayor's budget and then also in Keno?
No.
Oh.
I see $175,000 to Friendship Home, which serves a purpose in our community, but I happen to know personally that it is abused because there's no kind of entrance notification or screening. And I fail to see that $10,000 is needed in addition for this. And also you go out for safe quarters and collect hundreds of dollars through that. I think this is inappropriate use of the Keno funds, and that it can be better used for other agencies that are seeking monetary assistance.
Thank you. You could sit down, and Teresa, would you give her the additional time that we took from her testimony, because I want to make sure she gets her full 5 minutes.
Sure.
Continue, Ms. Kinsey, if you'd like. Do you have any further?
I do like to have my 5 minutes.
I know.
Because I didn't get through everything I had to say.
Please continue.
About the other thing. I don't want to go over or make a big issue out of it, but I do think you need to be reminded that everybody needs 5 minutes. If you have public hearings that are going to be lengthy, please make allowance for that so that everybody gets to speak their 5 minutes. One person got 5 minutes, the rest of us got less. I do not think that is democratic. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other further testimony on these items on our consent agenda? Okay. Seeing none, Teresa, can you take us? Oh, sorry, John.
Well, I think on this item, then, can we at least clarify if the 10,000 is in what we had originally put in the budget, or is that an additional amount? Is there someone here who can help us?
The 10,000 is from Keno funds. It is the Keno funds that were the attachment to your agenda.
Yeah, I see that, but under our budget, we had all of these items. We had most of these items, I believe, included. Did we not? Is there somebody who can clarify that?
That was my understanding, but I guess what I'm hearing you say is you're not sure if this was included in the 2016-2018 biennial budget that came before council. We certainly have, on an ongoing basis, roughly this amount appropriated, and then grants are decided upon by the JBC in conjunction with the Keno Advisory Committee. So,
Well, if I could, then I'd just make a motion to delay this for 1 week, and let's clarify that.
Okay.
Since there's been some question.
okay, I see that Jane has a question, and I know that Sarah needs to comment as well.
And I can't speak with 100% certainty, so we probably should have someone from the fiscal office address it, but I believe we do designate a certain amount of Keno funds on an annual basis in our budget to go, and then we entrust the JBC to make recommendations on how that is dispersed. And so this is a recommendation coming forward from the JBC on the disbursement of that $175,000 that I'm pretty sure is in the budget already. So this is just following forward on the recommendations from the JBC on how to actually disperse the Keno funds.
Yes, this amount came from the Budget and Fiscal Office. It's the projected revenue on what is generated from Keno funding.
Are there other questions from council for Sarah or staff?
I'll still renew my motion if there's a second to delay 1 week. I think there are other funds that go to Friendship Home too, if I'm not mistaken.
There are other funds, yes.
So I
As
just
far
want to
as-
clarify what we're talking about. I think it's,
Second.
Okay, we've had a motion to delay for 1 week. John, is that what you said?
yes.
And that's been seconded by Cindy. Discussion on that motion? Trent?
Would we keep the public hearing open? I mean, since we have a member of the public that's raising the issue, we could give her an additional 5 minutes next week and have her come forward and at the next meeting.
That'd be fine.
Jane?
For clarification, we're keeping the entire resolution.
So this would be a
Open.
motion to continue public hearing
And
and
vote.
action to
Action.
December 19th.
The entire resolution. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to ask Sarah a question if there are no more count. These grant awards, have grantees been notified? Will this in any way affect, the implementation of the grants, or can you sustain the week delay?
A week is fine. All of the services start January 1st. They've all been contacted. They've all been notified. It's all contingent upon the county board, which has already approved it, and then the city council.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
And then, what do you need from me for next week?
We need to get from our finance department.
Okay.
Trent?
Since I would venture to say that this is a fairly easy question to answer, I wonder if we if we didn't take action on it and we took action possibly once we had an answer maybe during the voting session. That way, if we're not inconveniencing any of the other groups that would be in this group, maybe John could withdraw his motion and Sarah could walk across the hall to finance and have somebody Hey, cool. All right. Have somebody come over and just tell us where these funds are coming from. That way, we take action on it today and don't delay things a week.
I appreciate that, but I guess if it's not in our budget, then that means all of these items wouldn't be in our budget. So I guess I think we need to really.
My suspicion
I
is
think
that
it's in the budget, but
It's in the budget.
let's not think, let's just make sure.
I think Jane's right, that it is in the
Say
budget.
that again?
Say it again. I didn't hear, did everybody hear that? Trent said I was right. For the record.
Speculative.
No, they all heard it. They all shook their head yes.
There was a thing.
Let's review the
Hey,
tape.
once in a while. Anyway, we could take action on this in our voting session if we wanted to. I don't want to belabor the point, but, since I think it's an easy question to answer, I don't see what a week would do, and that we could just not take action and take action on in the voting session.
Well, let's find out if the whole thing was in our budget then too, just because it opens. So I'd be willing to do that and see what
Okay.
happens. Okay.
If you want to do that, we'll just not take action and.
Okay. So, just to be clear, what do we need to do with the motion that John has made then? If
He needs to
Withdraw.
table it.
Can you,
Take it
do
off,
you
and
want
we'll
to
just
withdraw?
delay this item until later in our voting budget.
Yep,
Okay.
I'll just flag it to vote on it later.
Somebody's gonna go talk to our finance people.
Gonna run over there right now.
And find out all 175,000.
Hopefully we're still
Okay.
here.
Would anyone else like to speak on any of, oh, no, we've already done that. So, can I get a motion for action on the remaining items?
I move approval of items.
Just a second. Do you want to, did you ask for any more public input on the
I
rest of the
did
items?
prior to John's
Okay.
motion.
So items 3 through 5 were introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl and seconded by Roy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are our public hearing liquor resolutions, which we have none.
May we pause for a moment of silent
Sure.
celebration
Yeah.
on the fact that we have no liquor resolutions
I'll
today?
drink to that.
I'll drink to that.
I move approval.
Next then are our public hearing resolutions. Item 10, authorizing the Parks and Recreation Department submittal of a grant application to the Transportation Alternatives Program of the State of Nebraska Department of Roads to fund the construction of the Beal Slough Trail that connects the Howland Busalis Trail to the Yankee Hill Trail from approximately 56th and London Road to 70th and Yankee Hill Road.
Good afternoon. Sarah Hartzell with the Parks and Recreation Department. The trail that we are talking about, if I can. There we go. The Beal Slough Trail, or sorry, the Helen Busalis Trail is what a lot of people call the Highway 2 trail. This is the trail that runs along the north side of Highway 2. With the improvements that were recently made along South 56th Street, widening it to 4 lanes, the the Public Works Department extended that trail down to London Road, where it passes underneath the road, underneath 56th Street at Beal Slough. This project would be picking it up at that point, right at London Road, going through city-owned property down to Pine Lake Road, where it'll be part of an underpass as the creek runs underneath Pine Lake with an improvement project that Public Works is undertaking right now. And then we'll continue down to 70th Street and Yankee Hill. So that'll be essentially an extension for the Village Gardens development, the Woodlands at Yankee Hill development, oh boy, now I'm going to forget the name of the one down here. Down on Rokeby Road, there's another development going down there. So it'll provide access to the trail system for all of those. Additionally, Yankee Hill Trail is being constructed with the improvements to Yankee Hill associated with the new middle school and Jensen Park, and this will connect to that trail and really create a nice trail loop that'll go all the way up to the Billy Wolf Trail and back towards Home Lake. So this project is just in the initial phases right now. What I'm bringing to you today is the authorization for the mayor to enter into the agreement with NDOR. This is a trail that's being built with the Transportation Alternatives Program, which is specific funding that the NDOR gets from the Federal Highways Administration. They pay 80% of costs on the trail. We match 20%, and the 20% comes from the impact fees, which are collected in this district. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Roy?
What else could those impact fees be spent on? That's 221,000?
Yeah, 221,000 is the estimate. Those are specifically for parks and trails.
Other questions for Sarah?
And the district extends from Highway 2, roughly Pine Lake Road, and then over to about 27th Street. So it's kind of in that sector of town.
So I guess I'd rephrase my question then. What else inside Parks and Recreation could this 221,000 be spent on?
The funds can be used for trail development or also for park development. So they could be used to develop parks in that area too.
Could they be used to pay for any park maintenance?
No, they're CIP dollars.
Okay.
And they're for new development too.
John?
Would this apply to the Jensen Park that's in that vicinity?
Jensen Park would be in that vicinity.
So these could be spent on
Correct.
that.
They could. I'm not sure, John, or Lynn Johnson will have to answer if there's a proportionality there of a percentage that has to be spent on trails as opposed to parks.
Good afternoon, Lynn Johnson with Lincoln Parks and Recreation. This is neighborhood parks and trails impact fees, and so the funds are to be used for acquisition, development of new neighborhood parks, and then also new trails. So Jensen Park would not be eligible for these funds because Jensen Park is a community park and not a neighborhood park. And so it would have to be used for other acquisition of other neighborhood parkland or development of other neighborhood parkland or for trail improvements. And we essentially segregate the funds out between acquisition of land for new neighborhood parks and extension of the trail network.
If I may, how much are we going to be spending out of the impact fees for the development of other neighborhood parks?
We could certainly put together a report on that.
Rough ideas, because we're going to be handling this today.
I can get that number for you. I'll have to do some checking. This is a large enough district that we've identified a number of park areas that we are working on acquisition of parkland for and then development of as well. But I can certainly get that information if you'd like.
Jane?
Sarah, could you put on the Elmo again that this is going to be a new connector trail to these new developments, and it'll be connecting to which existing trail? I mean, it goes from the new
Correct.
developments?
So there is an existing trail along Old Cheney Road. There's an existing trail along Highway 2, which is the Helen Busalis Trail. And there's a trail that's currently being constructed with Yankee Hill that will be completed before this trail would be completed that connects over to the Billy Wolf Trail, which runs all the way down Antelope Valley to downtown. So this trail would connect from the Yankee Hill up to the Old Cheney and the Helen Busalis Trail.
And then in turn, you'd be able to catch the Billy Wolf Trail and go all the way up north.
Correct.
Well, I just have one more comment. As a cyclist, that would be great because we're always looking for alternative routes to keep going around and then north and just create a fantastic circular.
And this also, that because one of our goals is to get a trail within 1 mile of every dwelling unit, this also provides that service for neighborhoods on both sides of the trail as well as south of the trail.
Thank you, that's great.
Wanted to confirm what you were saying about the funding. As I understand it, the impact fees represent 20% of the funding for this project, and the remaining 80%, or the vast majority of it, is federal transportation alternative funds. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're leveraging these dollars to capture a sizable portion of non-local fee funds. Okay. And also in the staff report for this item and the other trail that's on our agenda, you talk about safe connections for children walking to school. Can you elaborate on that? Can you help us understand how this helps protect children's safety?
Sure. The majority of our commuter trails are set off of the county or the city right-of-way for roadways. So these are trails that travel through outlots of developments. They go through parks. Many of them have grade-separated crossings, so the children don't actually have to walk across the street. They go under or they go over the street. It provides a route that's sometimes more direct than going down a street and over because we can go on diagonals with those drainage ways. It's a good, safe, maintained Our crews get out and scrape snow off. We like to say a lot of times faster than the road crews can get out. So that's always a priority for our snow removal, is to get those treated as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you. All right.
Before the council voting session later, I will get the account balance on the funds that are available in this impact district, so that you know what the remaining balance is.
Would anyone like to come and speak on this item? All right, seeing none, please call the next item.
All right. Item 11, assessing liens for costs of registration fees and penalties for neglected buildings on the properties generally located at 1609 South 27th Street, 2125 South 14th Street, 3275 Hitchcock Street, 1709 North 29th Street, 3145 S Street, 2217 North 67th Street, 2236 Y Street, and 5120 L Street.
Afternoon, Council. This is an item similar to ones we have in the past. These are...
Chad, can you just let us know your name?
Sorry.
Introduce
Chad
yourself to
Blaha,
everyone.
Director of Building and Safety. Thank you for the reminder. This is a similar resolution to what we've brought to you before. It's in regard to the neglected building registry. That's the program that deals with vacant and vacant residential properties that have, for one reason or another, become in violation of our housing code or other codes. And it's just a tool that we employ to try and get the owners to bring these properties back into compliance. These properties have accumulated fees or unpaid fees by the property owners, and periodically we bring a number of them to you to assess these fees against the property in the form of liens. And so this represents this kind of batch of properties that have reached that point. I will point out that there is one property on there that we will be asking to be removed with a motion to amend at the voting session. There is another property that it's kind of the 11th hour. The property owner has come to us with some proposals to help bring it into conformance in order to avoid the lien. And we are waiting for some confirmation, and if we receive that between now and the voting session, we have a second motion to amend that would reflect that as well. So it would either be the one property to be removed or the second, but we'll hand that out at the voting session.
John.
Yes, Mr. Blaha, would you identify those two, just so we know? And while you're doing that, I also noticed you didn't get any service to 1609 South 27th, either by certified mail or forwarding other addresses, if I'm reading this correctly.
Well, the properties in question is, the first one that we will be asking to be removed is 3145 S Street. And then the other property is the iffy property is 2217 North 67th Street. Those are the two that may be removed. And the property that you just mentioned, John, was
First on the list here, 1609 South 27th, and it says on more information that you had return mail, and then you sent to another address, and it came back.
John, the chief housing inspector, is coming up to provide some additional.
John Boyce, Chief Housing Inspector. That property is a vacant property that was burned, and we had found out that the owner had moved to a different property, so we did send it to that other location.
But from our notes here, it says that was returned also. And they've moved and left no address.
Which mailing are we referring to here?
Garland Street.
Garland Street.
First sent it to an Adams Street address, that was returned, then you sent it to Garland Street, and that was returned.
Okay.
And moved, left no address, unable to forward, October 24th.
Oh, okay. Well, we have had conversations with the owner of the property, so they did get notice.
How recently would that have been?
It was quite a while ago, when we first started the process.
But since these notices were, the last one was sent on October 24th, if you haven't heard anything, you really don't have any legal communication with them.
I don't think by the ordinance we're required to do registered mail for every notice.
So if we act today on this, then that would just put a lien on the property of the 2,000.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Cindy?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to clarify, we have the Exhibit A. The Exhibit A has some addresses blacklined through, and none of those are what you've read today. And so basically, these are properties that have cured any problems with liens?
The blacked out properties?
Correct.
Yeah, those represent properties that, in between us originally submitting the resolution, and now they had previously also made efforts to come into compliance, or for other reason, allowed us to remove those liens from the.
So this would be an indication to us that it's working?
It's working.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions for staff? All right, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Please come forward and let us know your name and address. Thank you.
My name is Juan Rodriguez, and I'm the director of Proyecto Cultural, and this pertains to the property at 2236 Y Street. We're a nonprofit, and we have been trying to sell this property for about a year. That house is not livable. I went to the fire department for maybe a training exercise there. That was not an option. I've talked to some people that flip houses, and it's very low what they offer. Obviously, business. I understand that. A week or so ago, I went to the Habitat for Humanity, and they're looking at that option of buy-in between a flipper and Habitat for Humanity. We would take a loss and go with Habitat because I think they help the community. So we are willing to take a loss so we can comply with this lien. The reason for me being here is to, I don't know, ask for an extension, or I don't know what the council can do or the city attorneys can do. That's why I'm here. I've been working with on the phone with I think it's Joe or John, and very helpful. But it's just a financial thing with our organization at this time for the past couple of years. So I guess I'm here just ask for an extension or see what we can do. Give us a chance to sell that property and move on and comply.
Could you state your address for the record, please, or your address as opposed to the property address? Could you?
1110 Claremont Street.
Okay, thank you. And it looked like John had a question.
Questions?
Yes, could you clarify? You said you talked to two individuals, John and Joe, or something like that. Are they with the city, or are they with Habitat?
Building and safety.
Okay.
John, B-O-I-A-E-S?
Boyce.
Oh, boys.
Boyce.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Back to him.
Okay, I guess I would have, well, we can finish questions with Mr. Rodriguez and then have Mr. Boyce.
Any questions?
Any questions?
I think that's it. Oh, Jane?
I guess, and John is there as well, you're asking for an extension. Do you have a definite timeline that you're considering or suggesting or requesting?
The gentleman at the Habitat said he needed a week or so, okay? So I'm guessing at this point a month, maybe two, for all the paperwork and the holidays and everything, in order to sell the property at a loss, and then whatever we get, we would comply with the city as to what we need to pay.
Is it customary to give the property owners an extension, a reasonable extension?
I think we could, yes. I think we could in this situation. If we have potential buyer. That's ultimately what our goal is, so.
Okay.
I think we could extend some time, and if it doesn't develop, come back with the lien request.
What would you recommend for us on time?
I think a month would be adequate.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
so I think
Thank you.
you're looking at the person you need to talk to.
Okay.
so, to work it out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Jeff, could you just come up and advise us quickly? Sounds like we might have a solution working its way forward, but can you advise us on whether or not the ordinance requires anything of the council or allows us this flexibility?
It allows you the flexibility. I mean, the whole purpose, as Councilwoman Lamb alluded to, is not to collect this money. It is to use it as leverage to get folks with these neglected properties to do something with it. And so you can see by the number of properties crossed out, the amendment we have today, this would just be an additional oral amendment because he could have called us up yesterday or Friday and we would have added him potentially to this written amendment. So it accomplishes the purpose.
Great.
If the council would do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
John, did you-
Kirkpatrick, while
John.
you're here, then you had mentioned these other two properties. Are those also being resolved, and so you want those removed, or you want those extended?
We have one that we've got resolved and we would like to have removed. We have another one that we were in negotiations with, but we haven't got the final word, so.
Which one is that you're
Oh,
negotiating?
here comes Chris Connolly.
It's North 67th Street, John.
Okay. Would you like, say, a 1-month extension on that one as well to keep the
No.
pressure on?
No. Yes, please.
Why not?
Chris Connolly, Assistant City Attorney. With regard to the Lee Anderson property, I did get an email. I'm sorry, I've been back and forth with meetings.
I'm sorry, which
But-
property? Can you clarify the address for us since we're
Yeah,
looking?
2217 North 67th Street.
Okay, thank you.
We had worked out an arrangement with the owner's attorney, and I just got confirmation from him by email a little while ago. Would have been before the council meeting actually started, but I was tied up, and so I apologize for that. Anyway, so the motion to amend should reflect that they are coming off, that property is being taken off the list for now.
So we will have a motion to amend number 2 to
Yes.
remove 2217 North 67th Street during our voting session.
And-
Okay.
and I believe we have, you have that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not voting yet, so
Right.
And that sounds like we'll also have a motion to amend to
Number
extend by
3.
1 month Mr. Rodriguez's property that he just testified on.
I'm sorry, we would,
Well, we just had some testimony on 2236Y, and
oh,
it appears we'll give a 1-month extension on that, too.
okay,
Okay, thank you.
okay.
Thank you. All right. Teresa, please call the next item.
Gladly. Next is item 12, assessing the cost incurred for cutting, clearing, and removing weeds against the various benefited properties for the period of January 1st, 2016 through December 31st, 2016.
Good afternoon, Brent Meyer, Lancaster County Weed Superintendent. And through an interlocal agreement for 20 years now, we provided the weed abatement services for the city of Lincoln. So we started that in 1996. This is a unique program across the state. We are the only people that do this, so I think it's a value for the citizens of Lincoln that you don't have to know if you're in the city limits or outside the city limits, or if it's a noxious weed or weed abatement, so we take care of that for them. So the resolution before you today is just to assess the weed abatement properties, not the noxious weed. Noxious weed is handled through state law, so weed abatement is handled through the city ordinance. So you had an attachment there. Those are all the properties that have not been paid. There's a lot of those that have been crossed out, so since we sent the notice that this meeting was coming up to where they would be assessed as liens, there's a lot of those that have been paid, and we've cleared those off since then. So this is to attach liens on the rest of those that have not been paid to this point. So with that, I would sure be happy to answer any questions.
Carl.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer, I know I ask this question every time you come up, but I see several of them, addresses are the same or repeated.
Okay.
So what's the effort to contact those individuals after first offense and subsequent offenses?
Well, yeah, and those, if we look at the properties, might be a lot of the same properties you just dealt with in the previous
Right.
resolution. And I do have a number on that. Actually, that was down quite a little this year. So in 2015, we had 32 parcels that were forced on twice and one that was forced on 3 times. This year, we only had 17 that were enforced on twice and 5 parcels that we enforced on 3 times. So those are the worst of the worst. I guess they're hopefully get transitioned out through foreclosures and those kind of things next time. I know it's always been a wish of the city council and my wish as well, and the city attorney's office, that we could figure out a way to assess. We do administrative fees on top of what the contractor charges. I know the city of Omaha and Douglas County do a increasing fine fee. So the second time, you know, if it's $100 the first time, it's $200. The second time, it's $300. But we can't do that because ours is a what do I want to say? It's not a fine. We do administrative cost, and we can't justify administrative costs going up for the second, third time. So we do try to contact those, and I know you've got a lengthy agenda today, but I'm going to tell you more about the success story on these little orange signs that you've seen around town this summer. And the numbers, once they came in this year, were staggering on how much results we got. Over 467 properties, I think, we finalized out by just posting this sign this year. So we're required to send to the last known address that the Register of Deeds has. So a lot of times that notification comes back to us. Nobody really gets notified. Putting this on the property, somebody gets notified. There was an unintended consequence to that, as we dealt with a lot more phone calls in our office this year, but we did get a lot more properties handled early on. I know, in fact, our inspections per property were down this year at like 2.15 inspections versus 2.35 last year. So that's the first time we've had a significant reduction in our inspections per property. So we speeded up the process quite a little this year.
John, sorry.
So you said several properties have been resolved. Are they on this list, or is this list as of October 31st?
The ones that are crossed out have been paid. So maybe you don't have that.
None have been crossed out.
Well, I got something you don't have, I guess. So a number of those through.
And it was linked, the new attachment was linked on the agenda Friday.
Okay. So there is some of them on my list anyway. We've had some that were crossed out. So what you're approving today will be anything that hasn't been paid and crossed out since that original time. So, and I can leave this with you if you like to look it over.
So I guess we have to call that a substitute, attachment A, because our resolution refers to attachment A, which.
It was already attached online. Yes, it was.
What's the date of your attachment A?
I just put it out there on Friday.
Yeah, so the way that works is we have the original one and then the addendum is sent out. So any of those, the releases have already been done, so they're cleared off the list.
We do any more releases, or when we vote,
No,
that's it, they're
no,
due?
we will wait until everything's finalized here.
December 9th list on attachment A is the final. That
To
you
my
have in your
knowledge,
hands.
yes. Yes, it is.
Jane.
Brent, can you explain why item number 136 is so high, the cost for Eastboro Second Edition?
Oh, that was one brutal property. And it was really high, and the landowner was satisfied evidently with the cost, because that's one that has been paid in the addendum. So that item 136 on my list has been crossed off. That, we have a hard time dealing with trees. There's nobody in the city that wants to deal with volunteer trees. The weed abatement doesn't have the budget, as you can see, a $3,000 a lien against the property, when we have $30,000 to do all of the weed abatement for the city for the year. So that was a huge hit on us. It was a property that we worked on for a number of years and just couldn't get it cleaned up. So that was a lot of tree cutting, a lot of hauling to the landfill, a lot of chipping of trees, which we don't like to do volunteer trees. It is in our ordinance, we can do them. We've had numerous meetings with all the departments in the city, and we really haven't come up with a clear cut. Nobody wants to handle the volunteer trees because there's funding that needs to come with that. So you can see exactly right there in one item, if we had to start doing volunteer trees on a lot of properties, how much that would add to our budget, so. And I know Councilman Camp had asked last year how many liens we had on previous years, how many liens were still out there that are going back in time. And 2004 is our oldest one that we still have open that hasn't been foreclosed on. And we have $63,220.67 that remains out to be collected. And they do, as properties get sold and transitioned out, we collect
That's
on
in
those
all
every month.
properties,
That's
not
all
just that one.
properties
Okay.
for prior to this year. So. All right, thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? All right, please call the next item, Teresa.
All right, next are our public hearing ordinances, second reading. I will call items 13, 14, and 15 together. They are Street and Alley Vacation 16004, vacating a portion of the North 46th Street public right-of-way between the south right-of-way line of Orchard Street and the north right-of-way line of Y Street. Change of zone 16029, application of Judith and Harold Hoppy for a change of zone from R2 Residential District to RT Residential Transition District and from R2 Residential to R4 Residential on property generally located at North 46th and Orchard. And use permit 16008, application of Judith and Harold Hoppy to allow for the construction of an office in an RT Residential Transition District with waivers to RT District parking lot setbacks and sign location at 46th and R.
Madam Chair, members of the council, my name is J.D. Burt, 218 South 38th, and I'd like to thank Teresa for making my presentation. It was very, very concise. The long and short of this project is, this started out, year ago, possibly 9 months to a year, for Habitat for Humanity. Judith and Harold Hoppy own a half a block of undeveloped real estate, generally located at the southeast corner of 46th and Orchard. 46th Street is not paved, but the right-of-way exists. To make all this happen, after we sat down and talked to the planning department, we needed to do some reconfiguration of lot lines, which is why the final plat. And when you reconfigure the lot lines, we found that nobody really wanted 46th Street. So that's the vacation. The end result is we ended up with a nice lot that's adequate to accommodate Habitat for Humanity at the northeast corner of the property, which is the RT zoning. We've met with the neighbors. We had a nice meeting over at the Habitat Restore store on October 6th, I believe it was. And we had 7 or 8 people show up, and including Ann Bleed, that I think some of you might know. Everybody was very, very receptive of our idea. They were very, very happy to not see multifamily. Through the years, there have been several applications on this property, and all of them have been withdrawn or gone down in flames because they included multifamily. The neighborhood didn't want multifamily, so this plan came forward with single family adjacent to existing properties, 2 duplex lots on Y Street, one of which is where those existing radio towers are located, and that tower assembly is going to prevent any residential use on that property until that tower is gone. So essentially, we have one duplex lot on Y Street that will be available for sale, 1 single family on Y Street, and 1 single family on Orchard Street. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? All right, Teresa. Oh, we do have someone. Thank you.
Jerry Boyce, 4631 South 67th. Longtime home builder here in Lincoln. I am currently the Habitat for Humanity construction manager, together with a great core group of volunteers working every Habitat workday, along with community and church groups. We build between 5 and 6 homes a year, and we would be building the office. We wanted to design it in such a way that it looked like a single-family home, basically one that we build, so that it would blend in with the existing residential neighborhood. You'll see one which is under construction right now. This is a very small corner lot, and so we had to reconfigure the covered front porch and whatnot. But we added the box-out windows on the second street facade to dress up that side a little bit. And so we'll be doing that same thing on the office to dress up the facade of the office. But other than its larger size, a sign in the front yard and the wider driveway, it looks like a single-family home and should blend in very nicely with the existing homes in the area. We also wanted to use the office as a bit of a showroom, if you will, for our future homeowners. We can show them this is your same siding, your covered front porch will be similar, your egress window out of the basement for emergency purposes, the same cabinetry, doors, trim, and so forth inside. So we think it's a very nice project and would certainly urge your support. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Boyce?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this item? All right, seeing none, please call the next item, Teresa.
All right, next I will call items 16 and 17. They are amending the fiscal year 16-17 CIP to authorize and appropriate $320,000 in TIF funds for the Victory Park VA Campus Phase 1 Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing Project, authorizing amendments to Ordinance 20261, approved October 26, 2015, authorizing tax allocation bonds for the Victory Park VA Campus Redevelopment Project.
Members of the City Council, David Landis, Urban Development Department Director, the applicant in this case. Because of the time frame and the importance of action, the Victory Park redevelopment agreement was approved because it was a resolution that could be voted on that week, and that allowed the timeline for the project to be met. These were ordinances that required 3 readings, which is why they appear at a different time than the redevelopment agreement, something that we've done on more than one occasion. One of these is very specific about the CIP, and that is to give the specific CIP implications of the VASH housing. And this is to create the CIP authority for $320,000 of tax increment financing for that part of the project. The second piece is the overall project itself, and on that score, we had an action taken about a year ago, and it outlined a total amount of investment and a total amount of tax increment financing because of that. Since that time, things have changed. The projections for what would be built if the whole project was to go forward grew from $120 million to $128 million, and the amount of TIF grew from $7,100,000 to $7,650,000. There is a maximum of interest on the TIF bonds should they be released, and that is 8%. In the event the project goes forward and additional phases are added, they will be brought to you one at a time in a CIP amendment for what will be going forward. That's why the VASH housing is here as a separate piece, and then the canvas upon which the entire project is slated for construction is the second of the two. You will see that in pieces over time in the CIP as those come forward and as we do redevelopment agreements, should that be the case. A piece of information you might find of interest is that after about 6 years of waiting, the federal government has given a particular timeline for the submission of RFP responses for the clinic. And that timeline is January 19th. So after about 6 years of waiting, we got about 6 weeks to get RFPs in on the clinic. And we can anticipate that this will be one of those potential claimants for doing the work on the clinic in Lincoln. Are there questions?
Question for Dave?
Thank you.
I do have a question for you. So just to clarify and make sure I understand what you're saying, when we were looking at this in October, we approved an amendment to the redevelopment agreement. At that time, we discussed this allocation for TIF, but we didn't specifically amend the bond ordinance at that time.
We
and
didn't,
that's what we're doing
and the
today?
reason we didn't is, one of the reasons that we didn't was because of the necessity of hitting a very tight window. And the piece that we could segregate was the agreement, which was a resolution and could be voted on by the council, which you did. Thank you very much. These pieces triggered 3 readings and a longer timeline. And if we had merged them as a package, we would have been over the timeline necessary to take action on the VASH housing. This allows us to do what we can, meet the VASH housing, which has been done, and then do this in the timely way and not ask the council to act in some unique and different way as far as approval process.
At that time in October, I think I asked the question about the total TIF for the project, because this is obviously, like you said, in many phases, and depending on what happens with the location of the federal clinic, certain stages may not come forward in the future.
That's true.
So the TIF authorization in the bond ordinance is contingent on those future approvals. We're not going to be issuing bonds to the full amount. These will be phased in according to actual usage and need. Is that correct?
I think you could think of it as establishing the boundaries, and then individually, projects will come forward. They'll have a redevelopment agreement. You'll see it in that context. And the money for that particular project, whatever it might be, a medical building, a clinic, whatever, will be broken out for a separate CIP action.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this item?
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs of Lincoln Government. As I recall, we were concerned about the TIF given again to private developers. It sounds like this is going to go on and on and on. We have concerns about the TIF and using the TIF for that purpose. I guess we don't like to have an open-ended question here, or amount, or whatever. So it sounds very vague. I would ask you to get more information before you make some kind of vote on this. It could go into many, many millions of dollars. If the clinic is not built there, the whole thing may fall through, or part of it. We also, I would like to point out, have a new administration in Washington, D.C. that could make all kinds of difference about this project. Now, I know Senator Fisher has worked on getting this done, because I've been down to her office and talked to her representative about, this was before the vote in October, about the whole total ramifications of this vote, or of this encouragement, and the way that she has done to get this approved. Now, I guess I don't know the full ramifications of this. If Mr. Landis would like to give me that, I'd appreciate it, so I could speak more to it in the future. It just sounds like it's a iffy project, and I think if you vote on the TIF, that it can't be rescinded, or maybe you can rescind it, but I think you're giving the project and Mr. Landis carte blanche to use taxpayers' money. Of course, in the end, the TIF does take money from the city budget. And since we've already had a raise in property taxes, and looks like we might have a raises in the wheel tax, I urge you to be careful about voting for this. And encourage you to be careful watchers. Give careful watch over taxpayer money.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Good afternoon. My name is Kent Seacrest, representing Burlington Capital and Seniors Foundation. You already approved the bond ordinance once. This is adjusting the amount. So there's no real increase other than the $500,000, which has been justified when you approved it in October. You authorized and approved that TIF amount back then. This is merely the bond ordinance that catches up and makes what you did in October consistent and lawful. This is not a blank check approach. We spelled out different phases in the redevelopment agreement amendment you did in October, and assuming we stay on track, then those amounts would come back to you as a separate bond ordinance down the road, as well as approval of those different phases. But assuming we stay on track, we spelled out the amount and you saw those amounts. If we don't do a project, then we won't be able to come forward and obtain that amount of TIF, and you wouldn't be doing a bond ordinance for that amount either. But we'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Trent.
So what is going forward is the VASH housing in phase 1.
Correct.
And then the second and third phases are dependent upon other action by other people. So the second phase is due to a clinic which could go here, could not go here. We'd prefer it here, but we're flexible on that.
That's exactly correct. And David mentioned that the clinic proposal is out on the street, and hopefully we will be the successful party. And if we are, then I think you'll see the proposed phases march forward. If we're not, then we'll have to scratch our heads with you and figure out what's that mean, and we'll probably be doing maybe some modifications at that time.
And then phase 3 just is open because we don't know what's going to happen with the clinic, and there could be other things that could happen on this property. So we kind of have an understanding of what our path forward is, to just, how these pieces fall into place, like other development areas that we might do all over town. That's why this is pretty open-ended.
Right. This is 60 acres, and we're not used to doing TIF projects at that scale. And there's more than 3 phases. I think we outlined 7 in the redevelopment agreement, different types of housing stock. We're comprising the phases.
And the tax increment financing was needed because the infrastructure in the ground, the sewer pipes were aged, and you wouldn't be able to do a project on this unless you had those dollars to move forward.
That plus the facade, trying to keep the old historical, not main hospital, along with the other buildings out there. They need some tender loving care. And so some of the TIF goes into the facade historic restoration. We're subject to all sorts of federal laws on historic preservation, and we're glad to be subject to them, but they do take some extra work to comply with.
And they lit it up with red and green lights for the holidays, which looks really cool.
Yes.
Carl.
Yeah,
Then
just,
John.
just to reiterate what Trent was asking, this particular TIF is only for the VASH housing.
That's correct.
And by the way, it's really important and needed. There's Homeless Coalition, one of their stated goals is to get to functional zero in terms of homeless numbers in the community for veterans, and this is a really important component for getting us there.
Yes, it is.
John?
Yes, Mr. Sechrist, would you just refresh everyone's memory how this is going to work, where the VA has, the federal government still owns the land and there's kind of a lease, and how we do get the TIF on that land that's not directly owned?
Well, last October, we finally got the main 75-year lease between the VA administration and Seniors Foundation signed. So it was not a sale, it was a 75-year lease. Within there, then the Seniors Foundation has teamed up with Burlington Capital to do what I call the heavy lifting of the redevelopment projects, these 7 potential phases, and we will be doing that and building them, and after 75 years, those improvements, those housing, whatever, will revert back to the federal government. So it's a 75-year window that we have to deal with. And that changes a lot of economics too.
And within that period, we get to collect property taxes?
Yes, definitely. The improvements that we will be making are definitely going to be tax and subject to property taxes. And the TIF will allow the capture for 15 years, but thereafter, for the next 60 years thereafter, we'll go on the tax rolls as normal, and every governmental entity will enjoy the benefit. And we did prove the but-for test to the city administration that without TIF, this type of housing that Carl mentions doesn't go anywhere.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Mr. Landis, did you want another opportunity to speak? Okay. All right. Please call the next item.
All right, then, we'll go on to the next items. Jeff, do you want me to call 18 through 27?
Yes.
Okay. I'll call 18 through 27 together. They are consent amendments to various ordinances. We have one amending Chapter 2.02 relating to governmental organization to redesignate the Traffic Operations Division as the Traffic Engineering Division, adding the Right-of-Way Management Division. Amending Chapter 2.76 relating to the personnel system to clarify certain matters relating to the Human Resources Department, including application procedures, veteran preferences, examination standings, and removal of names from eligibility lists. Amending Chapter 4.20 relating to the Library Board to clarify certain Library Board procedures. Amending Chapter 4.24 entitled the Lincoln Electric System Administrative Board relating to powers and duties. Amending Title 5 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to licenses and regulations by repealing Chapter 5.18 entitled Charitable Solicitations. Amending Chapter 6.04 Animal Control Regulations generally, relating to permit required to have animal exhibit or rides to change the reference from Pershing Auditorium to the Pinnacle Bank Arena. Amending Section 14.24.060 relating to street number on curb of paving to amend the description of how address numbers can be painted on curbs. Amending Chapter 17.58 entitled Regulation of Wastewater Discharge to redesignate wastewater treatment plants as water resource recovery facilities. Technical amendments ordinance amending Chapter 27.67 relating to parking. And consent amendments amending Chapter 10.34 entitled Parking Meters relating to parking fees and time limits to amend the department authorized to set parking fees.
Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney. As I think most of you recall, under administrative regulation, we try to come before this council once a year with a series of technical and consent amendments. These are primarily cleanup things. It gives us an opportunity to collect archaic and minor changes throughout the year and then just bring them to you one time a year, go through them quickly. If there's anything that you feel doesn't belong as a consent or technical change, we can certainly continue that and have somebody from the department come in and present to you on why they think it's necessary. But let me run quickly through the proposed changes and let me know if you have any questions. The first one comes from Public Works. Two changes. One is changing traffic operations to traffic engineering. This is a name change, I think, that represents the change of philosophy within that division. The second change they're making is they've already created a right-of-way management division. This just calls it out within the code, and as a result of the fact that right-of-way management has become more important and more professionalized in the last few years, in part because of the city conduit project, where we're installing conduit and cable throughout the city. And as we're doing that, it became more and more important to know what's actually in the right-of-way, so we don't keep cutting cable for television and LES lines and so on. The second one comes from Human Resources Department. A number of relatively minor changes. Some of them, as you read through, just reflects what's going on in reality now. We're taking out the postmark before midnight of that date and talking about all applications being sent electronically, just because people don't apply through the mail anymore. They all have to apply electronically. There is a significant change as far as veterans' preferences and how that is applied. I think that is done in response to a change in state law, but instead of just saying veterans will receive a preference, it specifically lays out what that preference will be. And so then you've got a couple of changes as far as what happens when email is undeliverable, a change in the notification of examination results. And this is like a number of these changes that's not directing the department to make a change, but rather reflecting in the code a change that the department already made in actuality. And the same goes to the next one having to do with the library board. The library is not changing what it's been doing, it's just asking to change the code to reflect the fact that, for example, they have not elected a secretary for some time. As a matter of fact, the duties of a secretary of the board are carried out by a staff person, and so they haven't been electing a secretary. The library has been submitting annual reports, but doesn't need to be signed by the president and the secretary, who doesn't exist. And the requirement that the report be verified by affidavit by the officers of the board is, again, our archaic requirement that hasn't been followed by the library board in a number of years. The LES change is probably the simplest change we're asking to make. At some point, the LES staff, when they were reviewing the code, noticed that there was a reference to Article 9, when under the charter, it's not Article 9 that talks about LES. It's not Article 11 that refers to LES, it's Article 9, so they ask us to make that clarification, that change. So we're not changing what says in the charter, we're just reflecting and giving you the accurate article, putting that into the code. Of all of the changes, the one that comes the closest to being substantive is the next one, and we're asking the council to remove the entire chapter referring to charitable solicitations. And this could be considered a policy change, a significant policy change. Why we brought it to you as part of the consent amendments is, and you might want to visit with Teresa at more length about what her office actually does. This has been in the code for quite some time. Over time, I think fewer and fewer people became aware of it. They were not filing for permit to do charitable solicitations. They were not filing the report that is required under the code when they finished the solicitations. Our recommendation to you is that this entire section be deleted, A, because it's not necessary, and B, for the most part within the city of Lincoln, we believe it's being ignored. And so if you determine that you don't want to delete it from the code, then I think we would take that as an instruction to the clerk's office and to the law department that we would be actively enforcing this code, which means we would be spending a significant amount of resources going out and telling the charitable community, you need to make sure to file under the code, you need to make sure that you're filing your reports under the code for your solicitations. It's going to create a lot of work for these charities throughout the community, And the question, I think, before you is this necessary? Now, again, the reason why we're bringing it to you as a consent amendment rather than saying this is a substantive change is because we think this is a section of the code that has just been gradually being ignored and dying away. And so we're coming to you today saying this has been ignored for quite a period of time. Why don't you take that last step and remove it from the code? Last year, I brought you several changes having to do with the change from Pershing Auditorium, I think it was last year, it might have been 2 years ago, to Pinnacle Bank Arena. We tried to catch all of the code references to the Pershing Auditorium. One that we missed had to do with requirement for permits for animal exhibits and rides, such as when they have a rodeo. For years under the code, if there was a rodeo at the Pershing Auditorium, they were not required to get a permit, just as the county fair. If you have horse shows out there, you're not required to get a permit. We had not noticed that particular requirement, had not switched it over to Pinnacle Bank Arena. This consent amendment would replace the requirement or the elimination of Pershing Auditorium, replace it with Pinnacle Bank Arena. The next one is a code change that was actually brought to us by Councilman Eskridge. He had someone who has a business of painting the house addresses on curbs, who emailed Councilman Eskridge and said, why is there a limitation on only 3 inches high? That is not necessarily easy to see, doesn't really make a lot of sense. Other communities have larger addresses. Councilman Eskridge sent it to the law department and several other departments. We couldn't think of a good reason not to allow some more flexibility there, and so we bring it to you in a simplification, and it says the numbers must have to be at least 3 inches high, and if someone wants larger numbers because they're easier to see, that's allowed, as well as allowing different colors, as long as the contrast is clear enough so the numbers can be seen. The next one comes from Public Works as well. And this is primarily changing the wastewater to water resource recovery, which reflects not just a name change, but I think an ongoing change in philosophy as how we regard wastewater. It's just not a matter of cleaning up sewage so we can dispose of it, but actually seeing it as a resource that, for example, in Innovation Campus, we've got an arrangement with Innovation Campus where they actually use that for heating. The other thing that we're doing in this consent amendment is there's several references in here to the Department of Environmental Control, which hasn't existed since the early 90s. It was changed to the Department of Environmental Quality, and we're recognizing that change. It's one of those things we hadn't really paid any attention to, but since we were changing this code section, it made sense to go through and clean that up, as well as making a few other just cleanup provisions there. And I believe the last one, next to the last one comes from the Planning Department as far as a technical amendment, cleaning up a reference, two small changes as far as referring to not catch heads but catch words, and cleaning up an incorrect reference that was made on a previous code change. That came from the Planning Department. And then there is the last one, 16133, which clarifies that the setting of parking fees is now no longer set by Public Works, but rather by Urban Development. And that was a change that had taken place in the past, and we're just recognizing that code with this cleanup amendment. With that, I would take any questions.
Well, on the last one, Mr. Kirkpatrick, I thought that the city council was the final authority on parking rates.
Well, what this does is it transfers authority from the Director of Urban, or from Public Works to Urban Development. So it doesn't give the Director of Urban Development any more authority or power than the code had previously given to the Director of Public Works. It just shows which city department is working with the parking program. There, as you read through that, you'll see there's no creation of any new authority. It's just a matter of changing who has that responsibility.
Well, I know if I recall correctly, our annual budget or biennial budget has the rates in there that they've done, and we have to approve that.
Well, I know it's certainly part of the budget, yes.
So I guess I'd like you to create some language to amend it to say something about that the Director of Urban Development or whomever could recommend to the City Council. But I think that is it's a fee, what have you. I think that should be approved by the City Council and be acknowledged as such, even if it's within a biennial budget.
Okay. Well, this is the consent amendment I brought before you. You can remove it from the agenda if you like.
Okay, I'll talk to you later about amending it if you would contact me.
Okay.
Cindy?
Thank you. So I had a couple questions. One is, I did want to know, because you had indicated that some of this cleanup has to do with things that are already taking place or rules that they're not following, or for lack of anything better. Number 20, with having to do with the library board.
Yes.
I was struck by the elimination of the verification by affidavit, and I wondered when they stopped doing that under the rules and why.
I cannot tell you when it was done. I know that I served as president of the library board probably 7 years ago, and I wasn't signing an affidavit at that point. The requirement that the library submit an annual report to this body has been in there for forever, and I know that report is still submitted to the council. But I think at some point they just assumed that the council would take the library director's word for it, that it was accurate, and didn't require an affidavit by the officers of the board.
Okay. The other one I wanted to visit with you about was the charitable solicitation. This is kind of something that was in place so that in case somebody called into the sheriff's department or something, we just know why somebody's knocking on our door for money, and that the police know they're in town. That was kind of the origin of this type of legislation.
I'm not sure if I can say that it was or not. I mean, it doesn't just talk about going door to door. It's really any sort of charitable solicitations within the city limits. So if you call somebody up, if you're doing a telephone drive to raise money, you'd also be covered under this.
Right, and so our local law enforcement would know that was happening, so that in case citizens called in?
Well, I suppose anybody, whether it's the law enforcement or John Q. Public, could check with the clerk's office and say, is so-and-so, and one of the things I've kind of wondered about is it talks about charitable, benevolent, civic causes or organizations. Does civic include political organizations? In other words, when you ran for city council, should you have filed under this ordinance with the city clerk? And I don't know what the answer to that is, but certainly civic is going to include a wide range of organizations, almost all of which have not been filing with the clerk's office for quite a long period of time.
I guess I think when I read this, it reminded me just of a visitor this week, that young man that came to the door, he's from out of town, they're selling candy for some kind of scholarship program, and that's the type of thing I thought about. Well, that would be the thing. In a small community, you would still call up the sheriff's department to find out, did they get their local little permit, so that you know who's in town collecting money.
Well, and there is a separate provision, the peddler's permit. And so when someone comes to your door and wants to see if you'd be interested in new windows or change your internet service provider, they're required to have a peddler's permit. And so one of the things, if you've got someone knocking on your door who's trying to sell you candy bars for too much money, you can always ask them if they have a peddler's permit. Because my experience has been quite often, they'll just leave you alone.
But if it's a charitable source.
A charitable source, yeah, and sometimes you get into a rather, the question about where they fit on the line. But I would tell you that the peddler's permit section is not affected by this. That will still be in effect, and we think that serves a very valid purpose. And I can tell you part of what I do is act as legal counsel to the peddler's permit appeal board, and we have a regular number of appeals, anything from selling ice cream on the street to people going door to door, selling windows or what have you. And there are a significant number of people that apply that we turn down because, generally speaking, because they have a criminal record.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up question with which item? John, were you talking about potentially looking at 16-133 and pulling that one, or the previous one about parking?
Well, these are all ordinances, and so we'll vote on them next week.
Right.
And so I think I will talk with Mr. Kirkpatrick about modifying 16-133, item 27, to verify in there that the city council has to be the final judge of the, or final approval and source.
That would be what you're saying, that would be a change to what's in existing
Well, I think
code.
that actually is
Yes.
what's happening in our budget, but I want to
Okay.
identify that it's there, that,
Okay.
so the public is protected by our
Then
body.
I just wanted to, I'm looking at the details of this particular proposal, and the only change that you're proposing, Jeff, is to cross out Director of Public Works and sub in Director of Urban Development. Is that correct?
Right, so that
Yeah.
makes it a technical consent amendment. I think what Councilman Camp is talking about is a little bit larger issue, but would certainly be something that could be amended before you vote on it next week.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jeff?
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on these consent amendment ordinances? Big surprise? Okay. Teresa, please call the next item.
All right, if not, that concludes our public hearing. We can move into the voting session.
Well, Teresa, Sarah Hoyle
Yes.
is here. Do we want to come back and revisit item number
Yes,
one?
the first one I was
Okay.
going to call was item
Okay.
number 1.
Sarah Hoyle, Director of Lincoln Lancaster Human Services. I did check with the Budget and Fiscal Office, and yes, it is in the mayor's budget. It is under item number 16 in the resolution that was adopted.
Thank you.
No new money, it's just that original 175,000.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you. We'll remove the thing.
So I was just going to confirm, so that I guess that would make me right. Would that, Trent,
Again?
would you confirm that?
You know, I'm just sitting here listening, so I'm gonna abstain.
We moved from the think to yes, definite.
Thank you, Sarah.
Or checking and coming back. Appreciate it. Okay.
I'm still going to do this.
There's some pigs flying out.
All right. So item 1 was introduced by Eskridge.
So moved, or second.
Just all leave and see.
I think I'm going to take over this meeting. We'll keep it moving.
One minute you're right, and the next minute you're wrong.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Carl and seconded by Roy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Oh, yeah.
Camp, Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Let's see. All right, then, public hearing resolutions. Item 10 is authorizing the Parks and Rec Department submittal of a grant application to the Transportation Alternatives Program of the State Department of Roads, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl and seconded by Roy, and I see Lynn.
Some additional information that was requested. This is Zone 6 of our impact fee districts. There is a balance of a little more than $485,000 in that district right now. The funds right now are earmarked for 2 different projects. They have been approved as part of the Capital Improvement Program and the Transportation Improvement Program. So there would be $221,000 of that $485,000 that would be designated as the match funds for the Beal Slough grant application. And then the other project that we're working on right now in that district is acquisition of a neighborhood park next to Wysong Elementary, which is between 5670th Pine Lake Road and Yankee Hill Road. And we have a commitment to LPS to purchase that piece of property for $251,000. So that's the next call on the remaining funds. Right now, that district, based on development, is generating about $100,000 a year. So as those funds come in, we look at and we prioritize what the next either neighborhood park acquisition project is or the next trail development project.
So with that, my mental calculator says you're about 60% going for the trails of the 400,000 that's in there now.
at this time, and it really varies from year to year because it depends on, we don't always have a trail project in every given year. We don't always have a neighborhood park improvement project in a given year. So overall, it's kind of a balancing between neighborhood parkland acquisition, development, and trail development. So you're right, out of the current funds, a significant percentage, just about half, would be going for
60%.
for this trail improvement project, and then the rest for acquisition of parkland, neighborhood parkland, and then moving forward, like I say, the next priority will probably be development of that park site next to Wysong Elementary. So it's hard to look at in a single year because we don't always have a trail project in a given year, if that makes sense.
I guess what I'm really wondering is what is the long-term percentage that's going to trails and what is going to neighborhood parks?
Great question. When the impact fee system was initially set up, the goal was that we would be about 80% neighborhood parkland acquisition, about 20% trail development. And the intent of these impact fees was that, or the portion of the neighborhood and parks and trails impact fees that is designated for trails projects is that they would be used as matching funds for the federal grant programs, as well as occasionally some private donations as well. So the short answer to the question is the intent was that it would be about 20% trails, 80% neighborhood parks.
So it sounds like we're going higher than those
trails. In this year anyway, we'd have to look back over the lifespan of all of the expenditures out of that impact fee zone. We could certainly do that, but
if you're only getting $100,000 a year for the parks and trails out of impact fees, $220,000 is 2.5 years.
yeah, it's several years. That's true. That is true.
Sounds like your 80-20 is not 80-20.
Could be it. We have not checked that lately.
Jane.
Lynn, what did you say the amount that is designated for the neighborhood park?
251,000.
251, and this is 221.
But there's only 400 in the
485,000.
60%.
And that's the current balance, and that balance continues to go up as additional homes are built and additional impact fees are paid into that fund, obviously.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
All right, so Teresa has called this item. Can I get a motion on this item?
I think we already have.
Did we have a motion?
Mm-hmm. It was moved and seconded.
Is there further discussion? I would just add that this is one way we try to make sure that the growing parts of our community are connected to the older parts of our community and provide safe pedestrian walkways for children to some of our newer schools that are being built or that have been built. And one of the benefits of this particular this item is that you're using impact fees and federal funding, so we're doing this without cost to our taxpayers and our community. So I think it's a great way to grow the community. Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-1. Item 11 is assessing the liens for costs of registration fees and penalties for neglected buildings on the properties generally located at 1609 South 27th Street, 2125 South 14th Street, 3275 Hitchcock, 1709 North 29th, 3145 S Street, 2217 North 67th, 2236 Y, and 5120 L Street, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane. Discussion? Motions.
I'd like to make a motion amend, just to be specific, if that attachment A is the one that was prepared as of,
I think you're talking about the weeds, and that's the next one.
oh, I'm sorry.
And so I've got an
Oh, no, I want to
amendment.
make, okay, yes, okay, I'd like to make a motion to remove item 3145 S Street and
2217 North.
20, were we going to give a month on that one?
No. Removing it. Removing it.
Okay, remove 2217 North 67th. And a 1-month extension on 2236Y.
We do have a motion to amend prepared that talks about the two properties that we have been negotiating prior to today. And so you could adopt this amendment and then make a separate motion on the Y Street property. And frankly, if you just make the motion, remove it from the list, and you basically put it back to building and safety and the law department to come back with you if that property owner doesn't follow through with the agreement. That would be one approach.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend number 1, right? That's those 2 properties.
Yes.
So we need another motion just to remove 2236 Y Street from the list.
Yes.
So moved.
Well, no,
Wait, John,
one month
John had
delay.
made it.
No, we want to remove, did you hear what he said? He said if we remove it from the list, it goes back to law and
Building and
Building
safety.
safety, and they will bring it back if there's a problem with the agreement that they're working out right now.
Okay.
Okay. So John, would you like to make a revised
Okay.
motion?
Well, I will just move to remove 3145S, remove 2217 North 67th.
That's
and
this one.
This one.
And stop there.
But actually, I'm going to say that.
Stop.
Okay.
Right there.
Second.
Okay. Moved by John and seconded by Jane. This motion that has been distributed to us by the city attorney. That is what we're talking about. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
And I make
Now-
motion to amend number 2 to remove 2236 Y Street.
Second.
Moved by John and seconded by Roy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold, Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. All right, next then. Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is item 12, assessing the costs incurred for cutting, clearing, and removing weeds for the period of January 1st, 2016 through December 31st, 2016. Introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion?
I move we substitute the new attachment A presented to us this afternoon by Brent Myers.
Second.
Moved by Jane and seconded by Trent. Discussion?
Could we have a Scrivener note on there? It says both of them say prepared on November 2nd. I think this one that Ms. Raybold is suggesting, we ought to say prepared on 12/9/2016, since that's what we were, just to keep it clear.
We don't need a motion on that. No. Okay.
Okay. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Ready to call the motion on the main item?
Oh, I'm sorry. Please call the motion on the main, please call the vote on the main item.
Fellers,
Yes.
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Public hearing ordinances, second reading, items 13 through 27. Ordinances, third reading, item 28, text amendment 16011, amending section 27.67.066 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to special parking requirements for certain uses in the H3 zoning district by updating the names of the uses to match names used in the use group tables and repealing section 27.67.066 of the Lincoln Municipal Code as hitherto existing, introduced by Christensen.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Carl. Discussion? It's just really a cleanup item for us. Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 29, amending Chapter 8.14 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to child care programs to adopt standards that are more stringent than current state regulations in order to provide a higher level of health and safety protection for children cared for in state licensed child care centers in Lincoln by amending various sections and repealing various sections of the Lincoln Municipal Code, introduced by Christensen.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Carl. Discussion? Well, we heard last week from our health director about how this sets higher standards for protecting children in state licensed child care facilities, and I wholeheartedly support that. Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 30 is amending Title 10 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to the safe operation on city sidewalks, streets, and crosswalks by people using skates, skateboards, scooters, toy vehicles, and similar conveyances by adding a new section numbered 10.02.316, amending Section 10.24.010, and repealing Section 10.24.010 of the Lincoln Municipal Code as hitherto existing, introduced by Christensen.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Carl. Discussion? John?
Yes, I'd like to introduce motion to amend number 1 that would insert on line 18 after the word conveyance, not to include bicycles.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick.
Okay, moved by John and seconded by Roy. Discussion on the amendment? All right, seeing none, please call, well, would you like to get a chance to look at it?
I guess I'll ask John just to clarify. This is just making sure we're still not having bicycles on sidewalks.
Correct, just to, make sure the word conveyance is not construed to include bicycles.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm an attorney.
Hey, more power to you.
Right. Any further discussion on this?
Well, and mine is more towards the overall. I have real problems with this particular, so I'll indicate that on the next discussion area.
Okay,
So.
let's vote on this motion to amend then that John has proposed. Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Okay, now further discussion on the main motion. Cindy?
Yes, as I discussed last week, I have problems with opening up our sidewalks to folks who aren't supposed to be using those type of vehicles right now. And I think the concerns are safety on two parts. I happened to speak with the Coalition for the Elderly last week, and I threw that out there and asked them, and they too were concerned that having skateboarders and scooters was going to interfere with their ability to navigate the downtown streets well. And for many of them, they use public transportation, either in the form of StarTran or a handy van, in order to come down and do what little shopping they do down there, or going even to the center over there for Aging Partners. And they are concerned with having this traffic. It may not be motorized, but it's still traffic to them, interfering and whipping around them, and they have mobility issues and stability issues more than anything. I also am really concerned with the safety. I think that we didn't really have a good definition of what toy vehicles were. My concern, I think that Councilman Christensen and I both immediately, when we heard about toy vehicles, were thinking radio controlled. That's what toy vehicles are in my family vernacular right now. And I am concerned that right now, if you had a toy vehicle going up to the federal building or the state building or the city county building in the downtown area, that would be a duck out of water, and it would be easily recognizable, and people would be, the attention would be called. And I'm not saying that we have folks in Lincoln that are going to load explosives onto toy vehicles, but there is that concern. And if the more vehicles that we put operating on wheels on the city streets, the less apt that someone is to recognize something out of the ordinary, because it will no longer be out of the ordinary. For that reason, I am not going to support this particular ordinance.
Further discussion? John, and then Carl.
Yeah, well, I would ask on page 2, line 11, there's subsection C that said it shall be unlawful for any person to operate skates, skateboards, scooters, toy vehicles, similar conveyances, in a careless manner or without due caution. and so forth, or in a reckless manner later. Does that provide some remedy, Ms. Lamb, or?
Well, I would say that it would provide remedy if someone gets hurt. Maybe if someone operated reckless or negligent, but it doesn't address the fact that it puts the hazard there to begin with. I think that they didn't feel that way, the folks that I visited with, and also it doesn't address the safety issue of if we don't have any vehicles on the sidewalk, any vehicle on the sidewalk is going to be noticed by folks that are there.
Carl, then Roy, then Jane.
All right. I understand the concern that Cindy raises, and I frankly would favor removing the term toy vehicles. I think it's a little ambiguous, and if it did include the kinds of remote control cars or things like that, that's not what I'm thinking of should be included here, and we don't want to encourage that. This ordinance encourages skateboards to be on downtown sidewalks versus in the streets, and I agree that's where they belong. It's an annoyance as a downtown resident and worker, but with the numbers of student housing projects that we've built across the downtown area, we're seeing more and more individuals on skateboards using it for their transportation. There are conflicts between both skateboards and bicyclists with motor vehicles and pedestrians, and this I'm supporting it because I think it's it seems to me to be reasonable. In addition to the language that John mentioned in terms of being careful in how you do these, not being careless or negligent or reckless in what you do. So I would support it. I would be interested in removing the toy vehicle language if there'd be support.
Okay. I had Roy, then Jane, and then Trent.
Okay, so I think we're all acknowledging that this de facto allows skateboards on the street, on the sidewalks. I don't think they belong there. I don't think the benefits outweigh the detriment to the community as a whole, so I can't support the skateboard on sidewalks downtown. And I can't support the confused people in the streets and whatever either. Just because the state put it in their statute doesn't mean anything to me, so.
Jane.
I have a question for Jeff. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the point of the putting in this language, we didn't want the skateboarders to be in the street because we felt it was unsafe.
Well, it's illegal for them to be in the streets, yes.
It's illegal, okay, that sort of
And
sums
is
it
it
up.
illegal to be on the sidewalk?
Not in most of the city, but it is illegal for skateboards to be on the sidewalk in what you might think of as urban core areas currently, which is downtown, College View, Havelock, and University Place. Those are the four that within certain defined borders, it's illegal to have skateboards on the sidewalks.
But my question goes, this gives law enforcement some capability or authority to cite someone if they are recklessly riding their skateboard and dodging in and out of people, and whereas before that didn't exist, correct? Did we have that authority, or the law enforcement had that clear authority to do that?
Law enforcement was able to write some tickets, but this would clarify exactly what the ordinance is that they're violating. So I think it gives law enforcement a better tool to write the ticket. And it's not just a matter of riding recklessly so as to endanger pedestrians.
Mm-hmm.
One of the concerns, frankly, with skateboarders was property damage because of the affinity for certain skateboarders to want to do tricks on, a lot of it was public property. When you think of, for example, around Pinnacle Bank Arena, but around the Tower Square as well. And so this, by putting in the code, if they were riding recklessly so as to endanger property, they could be ticketed for that as well. So that was one of the step forwards that we were intending with this code change.
Okay, yes, wait, I had Trent and then City again.
Carl, would you be comfortable with a definition on toy vehicle, if we could come up with one? Do we define it in the?
If I could speak to that just briefly. The reason why it's in there is because it's always been, I don't know how, when it got in there, I didn't really frankly think much about that. I would suggest that my interpretation of that is, talks about in other conveyances. So when you think about toy vehicles, you think about it in terms of a conveyance of a person, maybe a very small person. But having said that, I don't know that it's really much of an issue. I mean, when is the last time you just don't think of kids riding those toy Jeeps in urban areas. They're going to ride it up and down the driveway. I used to live by Mahoney Park. There was a kid down the street that rode all over the place. But you don't think of them as driving on Centennial Mall or in downtown Lincoln. I don't see a problem with just taking it out in this code in general. But
would we cite a 5-year-old that was driving a toy Jeep down the sidewalks
with
downtown Lincoln?
With the toy ticket.
Yeah, with the toy ticket.
Hey, if they were causing damage to public property, I'd be in favor of citing.
Okay, and then my other comment would go to, skateboards. I think they're a different method of transportation than a bicycle. I recognize my colleagues disagree with the fact that they don't think that they should be on sidewalks downtown, but I do work with a couple of people that commute via longboard, and I think the skateboard being a different vehicle than a bike, it's easier to jump off of a skateboard and not collide with somebody. I think you have more control over the vehicle than you might a bike, just with the regards that it's easier to get off and avoid that collision with somebody. And it gives me some comfort in voting for the change when you say that they could still be cited if they are being reckless. So with those two caveats on the toy vehicle and on the skateboards, I'm going to support this policy.
Okay, Cindy.
Yeah, I just had one more question. I just want to clarify, Jeff, Councilwoman Raybold asked about giving the law enforcement more authority to cite, but as it is right now, if someone's riding carelessly or recklessly or negligently on the sidewalk with a skateboard or a scooter, they can be cited.
Yes, they could be cited, and if they're riding recklessly, they're more likely to be cited, I think.
And they can't actually be cited just for being using the vehicle on
the sidewalk in the downtown area, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
John.
Yes, Mr. Kirkpatrick, as I see this legislation removes those 4 urban downtown areas. It strikes out subsection B on line 20 and on. So we no longer would have the exclusion on downtown.
Yes.
For example. And then also on line 8 of page 2 there, that subsection C should be redesignated as B. I'd like to make a motion that we delay this at least a week. I think there's some Scribner things, and maybe talk about some other ways of these items. Just all the questions. I think it might be
And I
prudent.
appreciate that. I would tell you that the reason why section B was removed is to allow those conveyances on downtown sidewalks.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we accomplished that, was by taking out section B. And then you'll notice that B, the notation, is not deleted. And so it becomes B, any person operating skateboards, et cetera. That would become the new section B, and then
Not stated
section
there,
D
though.
becomes C.
Yeah.
So that was addressed.
No, it's not addressed on my copy. C just comes, you have 2 Cs.
If your motion to delay is still in front of us, I'd ask that we do it after next week, unless there's some dire emergency, because next week's calendar is getting really long.
You want to delay it to our first meeting in January?
Yeah, I think that's what I would ask.
Weather anyway. Okay, I'd accept that for an amendment. Are you seconding?
Are you seconding?
Yes, I second. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, the motion to delay until our first meeting in January, which I believe is the 9th, was moved by John and seconded by Cindy. Discussion?
I'm not really in favor of that. I know John has good intentions. I'm ready to vote on it today, but I guess we'll see what the rest of the council wants.
Others? Jane, did you want to?
Well, I guess I'm not sure what delaying would do. what new information would come forward in a week, or 2, or 3?
Be like 4.
Or 4.
Of course, I would defer to Councilman Camp, but I think what he's saying is, hey, now we're carving out a number of different things that may give us an opportunity to look at what exactly we want in there. Councilman Christensen has said something about confused people. I've said something about toy vehicles. And so I think that it would be a good opportunity to look at all of those things and decide what we really want to go forward with, perhaps for something that's amended in its entirety.
It's fine, I guess.
Well, I was just going to add that I know that this has the support of our police chief. In emailing with him about this prior to the introduction last week, he said that he liked the added language prohibiting carelessness, recklessness, and negligent operation of a bike and skateboards. So he doesn't have a problem with some of the penalties. He thinks that the judicial discretion will do a good job in making sure the punishment matches the activities. So I guess given the amount of vetting this has had with our law enforcement and our city attorney, I feel comfortable with what's here. I'd be open to the toy vehicle amendment if that's what people want. But generally speaking, would defer to law enforcement on this and don't really see a need for delay. But that will call the roll on the delay.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Okay. Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Okay.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. All right, next then is item 31, amending Title 10 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to the right-of-way for bicycle riders by amending the definition of bicycle, the definition of crosswalk, adding a new section for the definition of shared use path, adding a new section entitled clearance when overtaking bicycles, amending a section to include more specific instructions for a turn right-hand signal to be used by any person operating a bicycle, adding a new section entitled drivers to exercise due care with pedestrians, amending a section entitled right-of-way, amending a section entitled right turn lanes, amending a section entitled left turns lanes, and adding a new section entitled overtaking and passing rules, amending section entitled riding on sidewalk and sidewalk space regulated, amending a section entitled operation on freeway or sidewalks prohibited, and repealing various sections, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Moved by John and seconded by Carl. Discussion. Cindy?
Now I'm confused. Isn't this the part where the confused people? Oh, okay.
No.
I had my notes probably down in the wrong section.
This is the part where the confused people vote.
I would have one question at the top of page 3, second line, it says any person operating a bicycle may signal. Do we want a discretionary, or do we want to make it mandatory?
It's about which signal they use, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
it recognizes that as a signal that you can use. So you've got two choices really, and that parallel state law, which also recognizes that as a signal. It's a signal that doesn't work very well if you're driving a car, because your arm's extended. But it works pretty well on a bicycle.
British car, it does.
But I still say, do we want to make it discretionary or mandatory?
What the discretion is, Carl, is whether they want it for a right turn, they can do this, or they can do that. That's the discretionary part.
The cyclist, the cyclist.
They do have to signal.
They have to
They're the
signal, but
choices.
they have a choice now.
Maybe this is the one with the confused people.
Thank you.
Yes.
Carl?
Bicycles are a real serious issue. I mean, skateboarders, you hear them coming. Bikes, you don't. Bikes are on you before you know it. They're going much, much faster. It's dangerous when you're leaving or going into parking garages. It's multiple incidents happen every day in downtown Lincoln involving bikes, and this is a serious deal. This gets bikes on the streets, really, where they belong. State laws going in this direction and was approved last year. Talking to members of the bicycling community, they want this. They think this is where bikes need to be encouraged to be. I'm supportive.
Other discussion?
Trent.
Jane and then Trent.
I too am supportive because I think it adds the safeguards for the cyclists, but also additional responsibilities for them to have greater awareness as they move through traffic. So, and as a cyclist, you are safer in the street.
I think Carl's right. The setbacks in downtown around the corners are so problematic for people that are riding bicycles on the street. And if you live down there, if you work down there, or even walk down there occasionally, having a bike on the street, somebody that's really, really close to the edge of a building, could really pop out and hurt you. That was my experience in living downtown. So I'm glad we're putting them in the right place.
And I would just echo my colleagues and say that, we think about public safety and crime, but this is one way we ensure public safety. We work to ensure public safety by clarifying the right-of-way and making sure that the roads are safe for bikes and cars to travel together. Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Yes. Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next is item 32, approving an updated master plan for Woods Park for adjustment of parking lots to accommodate expanded uses at the Health Department, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. Jane.
Could I have Lynn Johnson come up, please? So Lynn, I'm truly in a quandary on what to do when we have two different neighborhood associations, have two different recommendations. How have we handled that dialogue between the neighborhood associations when it comes to different impacts?
That's a great question, because I do think that is the challenge on this one. Obviously, the park, the health department are located within the Woods Park neighborhood area. The Woods Park neighborhood, although this is not their preferred option, they too have concerns about additional parking in the park, but they are accepting of it. I think they see the benefit of having designated parking for that third floor space at the health department. And they, for many years, dealt with parking in the neighborhood. And to be perfectly honest, we're trying to avoid that. We're bringing 30 employees to the park. We're developing an additional 10,000 square feet of office space. And we're trying to do it in a way that minimizes the impact both on the park and on the neighborhood. And I do understand the challenge here. We met with both the Witherby Neighborhood Association and the Woods Park Neighborhood Association Board. There were representatives of the Witherby Neighborhood Association Board at the Woods Park Neighborhood Association Board meeting, so they were privy to the conversation. I think the council knows that one of the recommendations that has come from the Witherby neighborhood is to look at acquiring one or more of the residential properties that are along the south side of N Street, immediately west of the Health Department employee parking lot. That's contrary to the Woods Park Neighborhood Association Board direction. That did come up during the discussion that we had when there were representatives of both neighborhood associations present. And I certainly understand why Witherby would bring that forward, but I do know that that is contrary to what the Woods Park Neighborhood Association would support.
Roy and then Cindy.
Well, I understand, and I met with some of the people from Witherby neighborhood. I understand what they're trying to say. There's a couple thoughts I have on this subject. Number one, we wouldn't be in this predicament if the city had followed its own rules about parking when this building was originally erected. The second part is I'm told that if we were to delay this part or any other part, but this part of the project, that it would cause a delay in actually beginning the project, maybe up to 2 months. And there are times when, as council members, we have to choose which good demands the most attention. And I think I am still 100% behind the Children's Zoo and their efforts to make this happen. I don't think we need to delay. So I wouldn't, if anybody's going to move to delay, I'm not going to support it.
Okay, Cindy.
Thank you. Lynn, I had a couple questions. First, can you tell me what the net effect is on green space at Woods Park once we have reestablished green space where the current small parking lots are and built new parking?
The net impact is about 10,000 square feet. There would be about a net change of about 10,000 square feet of what is grass today that would be a paved surface.
Okay, and are we having to replace that? I know you were checking on that.
We are not. Perhaps one thing that I should report to the council is that the Game and Parks Commission and the National Park Service have reviewed this amendment to the Woods Park Master Plan, and they have approved it. So one of the challenges I think we potentially have at this point is if we go back and look at other options, and if there are other options that have different impacts on the park, we would have to go back through that review process a second time. I would also tell you that we asked the Game and Parks Commission and the National Park Service to expedite review, which they did on all of this. And I would have significant concerns going back to them at this point and asking them for a second expedited review. I do have concerns if we were to delay this, because we've made a commitment to the zoo that we will be out of our administration building by the middle of March. If we don't have the opportunity to develop parking, we're either going to have to do one of two things: either delay our occupancy of the new space, or we're going to end up with people parking in the Woods Park neighborhood, on residential streets in the neighborhood. And I do think we need to try to avoid that. And that was something that Woods Park neighborhood dealt with for many, many years. And part of the expansion of the health department 10 years ago was to try to avoid that. And to Roy's point, it would have been nice to have addressed that parking for the third floor space at that time, but it didn't happen. So we're back addressing it now.
So as I understand it, because that is my concern, that the folks at Witherby felt like the city made a commitment to them not to enlarge any more parking at the expense of green space. And typically when we see, when the Planning Commission sees projects or we see a project, then the parking spaces are based upon the square footage and not on the number of employees in that building, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so am I to understand it that if this many employees had been there previously, there would have been a different requirement, or did we just completely drop the ball, or what?
And I wish Judy was here to explain this, because she'll be able to do it better than I would. When that building was developed, there was an analysis of how much parking that was needed. And if I remember right, it was over 300 parking spaces. There was a lot of negotiation that went on between the two neighborhood associations and the health department in that process. And I think about 250 parking spaces were actually developed. And so right now, there are probably less parking spaces than would be desirable there. But that was a negotiation, and there are Judy reports that on a weekly basis, parking there is essentially at capacity. So if we add any additional staff parking there, we're going to force parking into the neighborhood, which is an undesirable outcome.
Maybe we could get more of them to ride StarTran now that we have a great system right by O Street.
I love that idea, and hopefully we can encourage employees to utilize alternate transportation methods.
Okay, we still have a lot of questions here. We've got John, then Carl, then Jane.
Okay. Well, first of all, I have to plead guilt because I was on Public Building Commission, and it was my idea to put the third floor on that building. It really was. And the idea being we built the shell and future space. I had forgotten we negotiated down on the parking because it is based on a square footage. So shoot me out if you want. What was interesting is I too met with Witherby the other day, and looking at an aerial plan, what is concerning me is there's been an evolution here to take away green space. Now, I was also on the council when we did the Wesleyan baseball stadium and their facility, their field, and it was my understanding that would be open to the public when Wesleyan wasn't practicing. But I'm now understanding that's locked. And I can see why it might be locked to protect the turf, but that's taken an additional good section of Woods Park away. Am I remembering right that was supposed to be open for pickup games or something?
It was intended to be available to the public, and it is available to the public. It means they have to contact our office to reserve it. And so the intent there obviously is to preserve the integrity of the turf, because if it's open to the general public, one of the things that will happen is it'll be used for an informal dog run. And we did used to have that challenge there, and there would be dogs that would get in, people wouldn't monitor their dog's behavior, and they would either defecate in the area or they would dig in the area. And either one of those conditions creates an unsafe condition then for baseball players on the field. So the field is available for public use. They just have to contact our office to request that use. The other thing that we did at the time that field was developed, there is an informal play field just to the north of that we improved, because we wanted to make sure that there would be a place for people if they wanted to play a pickup game of sports in the park, or if they wanted to practice in the park, there'd be a facility available to them that they don't have to come to Parks and Recreation to reserve.
Okay, we got a couple other things. Is there a sign on the field that says if you want to use this to contact Parks?
There should be, and I will check. If there is not, we will make sure that there is, but that is always the intent, is to let people know what they need to do to get use of the facility.
Well, in painting a global picture here, we've got the Woods Park, or Woods Pool. I was one of the first people to jump off that top tower, so I remember that one when it came about. But it's now being taken a little bit by tournaments and special leagues. I did it 30 times more.
I believe you.
Double dares on that. Anyway, I am old. So anyway, the pool facility has taken a little bit of a change there too. It's used more for events, and so the public can't go there all the hours. And then we look at the Woods Tennis Centers having expansion, and yes, it's covering some outdoor courts, but depending what happens, that's, to its credit, Woods Tennis does have programs for disadvantaged and children and so forth, but it's taking some of it away. So I guess as I look at the park, I can see where the complexion has changed substantially in the last 30 or 40 years. And so I understand the concern, since this is more of a regional park. Is that what we define this as?
It's designated as a community park.
Community park. So I'm perplexed, but anyway.
Carl, and then Jane.
Thank you. It is Parks and Rec, and there are significant recreational facilities that are a part of this park. And that's really one of the things I think that is unique about Woods Park is, you've got the tennis, the swimming, the baseball, you've got fields that are used by midget football, all kinds of activities there that really is one of the things that separates this park. Woods Park residents have been loud in the past about the conflicts that they've had with traffic and parking in their neighborhood, so additional parking actually is of benefit to help there. Len, what's your plan for your overall plan for Woods Park? How are you going to develop it in the future in terms of the around the parking lot, green space, and things that you're going to be doing to improve Woods Park?
That's a great question. Obviously, our plans for Woods Park are guided by the master plan. One of the things that's identified in the master plan is irrigation of those play fields. That's one of our next priorities, is those two large play fields there get a tremendous amount of use to the point that the turf essentially wears out. So at some point, as funding is available, we'd like to get an irrigation well installed and then get those two areas irrigated. The northwest corner of the park is an ongoing conversation, to be perfectly honest. The playground and the park shelter and actually public restrooms used to be located in the northwest corner of the park. We relocated the playground and the shelter into a more central location in the park, as well as the restrooms as well. Right now, the master plan says that northwest corner of the park could potentially be community gardens, and we've had some conversations with Community Crops. They chose for their next project to be at Peter Pan Park. We haven't had a more recent conversation. One of the things I do think about, consolidation of the parking opens up more green space in that, more kind of unencumbered green space in that northwest corner of the park. That's large enough it could be an informal play field. So as we start to see, if we continue to see a kind of informal use, both programmed and unprogrammed use of the play fields there, that would give us another place to establish an informal play field that could take some of the pressure off the two existing large play fields that are in the park.
Jane.
Lynn, have you, I know you've had some exchanges with Witherby Neighborhood Association, but I don't know if you've articulated to them some solutions to screen some of the parking, because they clearly want to have that green space. Is there some, I guess, modification that can be made to accommodate screening? When we have a developer come before us, we ask them, what is your screening plan to accommodate the concerns of the neighbors? Do you have a screening plan?
We could certainly develop one. There is nice landscaping that was actually required as part of development of the Health Department employee parking lot to the north. We could extend some of that screening down and around the parking lot to kind of provide some screening. One of the things I think we want to try to avoid is screening it entirely, because we want to make sure that park users can find this parking. There is, both sides of Rogers Memorial Drive are designated no parking, partly because of the challenge of kids moving back and forth across that road and it being relatively narrow. And so we're hoping that by putting the parking in this location as well as the access drive, that we can get some of that parking off of Rogers Memorial Drive into this parking lot. So I think it's a balance, but yes, we can absolutely do some additional landscape screening around that parking lot.
Other questions? Okay, I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain what's happened too in the last week, because we have, I think many of us heard from, if not all of us, heard from concerned Witherby neighborhood residents. You sat down with Judy Halstead, the health department director, with your staff, and you looked at a number of potential options to try and address the concerns of the Witherby Neighborhood Association. Will you please take us through, as briefly as you can, the highlights and whether or not you came up with any practical alternatives?
Let me provide this to council in case you don't have it. This was in the council packet today. The Witherby Neighborhood Association, or members of the Witherby Neighborhood Association, provided a map identifying some potential areas of parking, and we looked at each one of those and identified whether it would work for parking, and that actually is included on the second page of your handout, and you can see the map that they provided. We evaluated each one of these areas. There were a couple areas where we could add a couple of parking spaces. We could potentially add 4 or 5 parking spaces at the south end of the east lot. We didn't find a significant number, to be perfectly honest. One of the things that we evaluated that was not part of the Witherby suggestion was, you can see from the aerial photo that the parking that is east of the building is angled parking today. We looked at the option of modifying that parking from angled parking to 90-degree parking because you could gain a few more spaces. It actually was about 8 additional spaces that pushes the parking about 20 feet west into Woods Park. And so we would still have an impact on Woods Park by modifying that parking lot.
Do you mean east?
Pardon me, east. Thank you. I apologize. And there is a landscaped berm there, and there are some spruce trees that are now 10 years old, and they've gotten well established, and it would affect both that berm and those spruce trees.
Which numbered space was that you just addressed?
It's actually on the map. If you see 2 at the top or 2 on the north end and 5 at the south, it's the parking lot in between, and that wasn't one of the areas or one of the recommendations that came from Witherby, but it was something that we took a look at to see whether we could modify that lot and gain some additional parking spaces within it. And unfortunately, it was about 8 spaces. It would have been significant cost, and it would have pushed that parking lot east into Woods Park. And so we would have, again have had impacts on Woods Park. We tried, to be perfectly honest. We looked at each one of these, and we did not find a significant opportunity. The other thing is that some of these spaces, for example, the area that's identified as number 6, it would be possible to add 2 parking spaces there, but that's expensive parking because you've got to tear out the existing curb and gutter, you've got to reinstall curb and gutter, and then you've got to pour the concrete for the parking. So we budget for about $2,500 per space. As we looked at some of these, the cost was approaching over $5,000 a space, and so there's that kind of balancing act between the impact that it has on the park and the green space versus the financial resources that are available.
Judy Halstead shared with us some information about some of the green spaces that we looked at for possible reconfiguration. One had to do with snow removal, one had to do with employees and a memorial. Can you just quickly hit on those points, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I can walk through these fairly quickly, and it's summarized here. On your plan, areas 1 and 2, that's the parking lots slope to the north. That's where snow is stored during the winter, so those parking spaces would not be available for snow removal. Area 3, when we took a look at that, that's the green space or the lawn area that's just north of the building. In order to get access to creating new parking spaces in that area, you'd have to eliminate parking spaces to create access drives. And as we looked at it, we found that it would be either a minimal or maybe no net increase in parking in that area. Area number 5 was actually, pardon me, area number 4, the number 4 is what I just talked about, which was converting the parking in that parking lot from angled to 90-degree parking. Area 5, that seating area that you see there is actually an outdoor seating area for employees in the building. Park users can use it as well. There were health department employees raised funds to develop that area. And so one scenario would displace that. Judy explained that there is a significant emotional attachment to that space, and that elimination of that would be a bad thing. There was also a commitment to the neighborhood to not make a connection between that parking lot east of the building and Rogers Memorial Drive to try to avoid that shortcut connection to O Street. So we found that there may be space there to do either 4 or 5 parking spaces at the south end of that east lot. Area number 6, there's enough space there to do 2 spaces. Area number 7 would affect the turning radius of vehicles exiting the parking lot and turning right. Area number 8, there is the opportunity to do some on-street angled parking there. The challenge is that where that's done in other places, it's really short-term parking, not long-term employee parking. And so it would do a couple of things. It would be a violation of what the city has typically done when it's allowed this kind of parking in the right-of-way. And the other thing that it would do is that the health department had made a commitment to present a nice face to the neighborhood there, a nice landscaped face to the neighborhood on that southwest corner of the building. Putting in angled parking there would really change the appearance of the building there. Areas 9 and 10 would have to be developed together. Area number 10 is a maintenance building where the grounds maintenance equipment is stored, and it needs to be someplace in close proximity, and there really isn't another place to place that building. And then number 11, there's the opportunity for perhaps 3 or maybe 4 parking spaces there. That's the clinic parking, though, and so it would be mixing employee parking with clinic parking, and that's something that Judy has recommended against. And I understand why. To try to, if you're trying to direct employees to a certain parking area and to direct the public to another parking area, that creates a little bit of confusion in that lot. And so, unfortunately, we looked at all of these, and we came back to the proposal of looking in the area that is south of the existing health department employee parking lot.
And then one final question, in terms of a percentage of the total park area, what does this 0.23 acres represent?
It's a good question. Woods Park is about 47 acres, and I could do the math, but it's a small percentage of the park area.
Half of 1%.
Yeah, and I do think that it's important to recognize is that this is park parking. This is really, the intent is that this be shared parking. It's putting parking really very close to the park activity areas in the park in a place where hopefully the general public will use them on evenings and weekends as well. So trying to get as much use out of that space as possible.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. No further questions for Lynn? Any further discussion on this particular item? I think what's clear is that everyone took the concerns seriously. There were intensive efforts by staff to try and find alternatives that were practical. We're hearing from staff that just wasn't the case due to previous commitments made and due to costs and also negotiations we have at the federal level. So while we certainly wanted to accommodate those needs, I hope that the Witherby Neighborhood Association will take comfort in the fact that this expansion of Woods Park represents half of 1% of the total park area for much needed staff and event parking that affects neighbors on all sides of the park. So Thank you for your efforts. And Teresa, please call the roll.
Thank you.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Camp,
No.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-1. Item 33, approving a construction and ground lease agreement between the City of Lincoln and Lincoln Children's Zoo governing the lease of current and expanded footprint of Lincoln Children's Zoo together with the Sciences Focus Program Zoo School for students operated by LPS on the Triangle generally bounded by 27th Street, Normal Boulevard, and A Street, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion?
We do have a motion to amend, actually, we have two motions to amend on this one.
Jeff, do you want to come up and explain the motions to amend for us?
I believe that motion to amend number 1 is now irrelevant because that would substitute the original lease agreement with the new one, and amendment number 2 substitutes that, but it also has additional language. So if we could just go with amendment number 2, has to do with the agreement coming in with the changes after we had gotten the approval of the State Game and Parks and the National Park Service, and then introduce some additional language about the effective date of the agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Trent and seconded by Roy. Discussion? Just a question for you, Jeff. Do you want us to change that to motion to amend number 1 now, or do you want us to leave it as number 2?
It's clear that it's amendment number 2. The fact that we don't introduce amendment number 1 is
It's irrelevant? Okay.
is irrelevant.
Thank you. Right. Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Now on the main motion.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Sorry, I didn't allow for discussion on that. Does anyone want? Okay.
Too late now?
We have plenty to do it on.
We sure do. All right.
Item 34 is approving a real estate purchase agreement of parking area between the city and the Lincoln Children's Zoo for the sale of city-owned parking lot generally located at 2847 South A Street, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
By Roy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 35, approving an operating agreement between the City of Lincoln and Lincoln Children's Zoo governing ongoing operation of Lincoln Children's Zoo on leased city property, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion?
And we have a motion to amend number 2.
I'll move the motion to amend number 2. Additional information was obtained by the third parties requiring a revision of this agreement, pretty much similar to what we did on the last one where we did a motion to amend.
Okay. Moved by Trent and seconded by Roy. Discussion? Please call the roll on the motion to amend number 2.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
And any discussion on the main motion?
Should we have the discussion of everybody saying nice things now? I'll take that. This is pretty cool that we see the development of 2 large parks in our city, one where we're moving our Parks Department to, and the second where we are expanding the Lincoln Children's Zoo, which is one of the finest things that we have in our community. I think it's been a long process, but thanks to hard work by the people that are sitting in the back of this room and the city staff and figuring out this puzzle of different land pieces. I think all of the people that have been involved in this deserve a round of applause, or at least a trip through the new zoo once it's built. So I just thank you for all the hard work. It's been really interesting to see this thing come forward, and now you get to build it.
Right. Any other discussion? Carl?
Sure. I like the way Trent put that in terms of both parks, because I think we will be seeing improvements at Woods Park, and that's a great thing for the central part of our city, but, and then get a expanded zoo as well, and all the opportunities that brings, and I see that Lincoln Public Schools is already on board with expanding their facilities there, so it's a great addition for our community.
Further comments? All right, please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is item 36, amending Title 12 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to parks by repealing Chapter 12.36 entitled Lincoln Children's Zoo in its entirety by repealing Sections 1236.010, 1236.020, 030, 040, 050, 060, 070, 080, and 090, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Roy, discussion? Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 37, Comp Plan Conformance 16005, declaring approximately 30,139 square feet of property generally located at 2847 A Street as surplus property, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
By Trent, discussion?
I'll take my shot now.
Okay.
This whole thing makes me really happy. There you go.
All right. Carl?
Just, you know, we've had a.
But you already had your.
But we had a lot of meetings on this project, and a small comparison to the number of meetings that the developers and applicants have had. But the very first meeting, it's always been about parking. You know, parking has been really a huge and important issue for how we do this, and I think finally we've come up with a good plan that works. So thanks for your stick-to-itiveness to get this done.
Jane?
Well, I just want to ditto what Roy said. It makes me happy too, because I grew up going to this park, even the stinky indoor park. I remember that pretty well. And just a beautiful transformation. And then I love taking my children there. And so now with all these new amenities and the expansion, I really can't wait, and I really look forward to taking my grandkids there.
I was just going to maybe also communicate some requests of very vocal constituents that we all have. A couple of people would like to see the lion remain, the recycling lion, and that they want to know if they'll still be screaming when the train goes through the tunnel. I trust that there will be. Yep, thumbs up on that. And likewise, I can't wait to take my kids there when this is all said and done. All right, please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is item 38, amending Chapter 27.63 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to special permits by amending Section 2763-170 to provide that a parking lot may be allowed by special permit in the R1 through R8 zoning districts and in the O2 zoning district if the parking lot is located within 360 feet from property occupied by a zoo and the parking lot is primarily used in connection with said zoo, and repealing Section 2763-170 as hitherto existing, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is item 39, change of zone 16028, application of the Parks and Rec Department for a change from B3 commercial to R6 residential on property generally located at 2847 A Street, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Trent. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next is item 40, Street and Alley Vacation 16005, vacating a portion of South 29th Street right-of-way, a portion of the east-west alley located in Block 2, Zering and Ames Addition, and a portion of Washington Street right-of-way generally located at 2847 A Street, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 41, special permit 16047, application of OPOC properties to construct an additional parking lot, including waivers to setbacks and stormwater detention at 2847 A Street, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Trent. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 42, waiver 16007, application of OPOC properties to waive parking lot surfacing requirements pursuant to section 2767-100 subsection C of the Lincoln Municipal Code on property generally located at 2847 A Street, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
By Trent. Discussion? Well, I just couldn't help noticing this name. It's sort of unusual. And does this make you like Oprah with her Harpo Productions, John? That's, yeah. All right, please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is item 43, change of zone 16022. Application of Parks and Rec to designate the Egger Building on Antelope Park Triangle east of 27th and P Streets as a landmark, changing the zoning district from P Public Use to P Public Use with Landmark Overlay at 1300 South 27th Street, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Trent. Discussion?
We made it.
John's got another
historical moment. Thank you. That's exactly right. The final historic moment. Several things. One, I'm proud to have introduced all of these measures. Two, I did grow up in that building with the spitting monkey, among other things. And I also enjoyed all through I grew up in that park as it was, when it was not a lot there. And I remember they used to have the bomber, the old Navy bomber there. In fact, when I was chair of the student council at Lincoln High, somebody painted on it LHS bomber, and we all went out there with a can of blue paint and painted over it. And the Sherman tank I never did anything with. But anyway, so these were my playgrounds, and so it's nice to see it get to new, higher heights. Thank you.
Trent?
I'm just going to say, at the end of this four-year term, I'm going to be able to tell the entire story of John Camp.
I've got a few tidbits left.
All right. Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Merry Christmas, Nick and John.
You know why Santa Claus has a garden, don't you?
Yes. Oh, but
So he can ho, ho, ho.
Okay.
all right.
We need some order here. Teresa? do you
Our
want-
resolutions on first reading are items 44 through 61. Ordinances first reading are items 62 through 74.
And I would move adjournment.
Second.
Moved by John and seconded by pretty much everybody. Please call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
We are adjourned.